Last year, over half of divorces were filed by women. But here's the real statistic no one talks about. Most men didn't leave because they were unhappy. They stayed because they were trained to tolerate pain. No one teaches men this part. They teach you how to fix a car, not how to fix a connection that keeps breaking you. How to lift weight, not how to lift yourself out of emotional debt. And that's why love for most men doesn't feel like warmth anymore. It feels like duty wrapped in affection. You see it everywhere, the man at dinner who laughs on cue, while his eyes have gone quiet. The husband who says, "It's fine," as if peace were a job, not a feeling. He's not weak. He's programmed. Programmed to protect even the person dismantling him. Programmed to equate affection with approval. What nobody tells men is this modern romance isn't partnership, it's performance. A system disguised as love, but designed like emotional capitalism rewarding compliance, punishing individuality. Every sacrifice becomes a new expectation. Every attempt to please becomes proof he still hasn't done enough. And the more he gives, the less he exists. This video isn't about hating women, it's about exposing the invisible economy of emotions. Because while men think they're in relationships, most are in contracts they never signed where peace costs self-respect. So before you call it love, ask yourself this: if you stopped performing tomorrow, would it still exist, or would the silence that follows finally tell you the truth? If that question hit something deep, stay. Subscribe. Drop your truth in the comments because this channel isn't therapy. It's deprogramming. It doesn't start with shouting. It starts with a sigh. That small, disappointed exhale that hits harder than any scream. She doesn't need words. Her silence does the cutting. And in that moment, he feels smaller, not because she yelled, but because she didn't have to. Most men think they're managing emotions. The truth: they're being managed by them. Every every pause, every cold look. It's not chaos, it's calibration. Not cruelty, but conditioning. The culture taught women that control equals safety, and men that surrender equals love. What nobody tells men is that calm can be the quietest form of control. The tragedy: men don't notice the cage because it's padded with politeness. They call it compromise. They call it maturity. They call it keeping the peace. But peace bought with obedience isn't peace, it's management. Love today feels less like connection and more like customer service. He's no longer a partner, he's performance support. One slip, one forgotten word, one tone too sharp, and she says the line that crushes him. I'm not mad, just disappointed. That's when the programming tightens. He stops laughing too loud, stops staying out too late. Not because he's afraid of her anger, but her withdrawal. Because nothing terrifies a man more than emotional eviction. What nobody tells men is that the reasonable woman doesn't destroy you through chaos. She destroys you through logic, through perfectly timed calm that makes you question your own sanity. And that's the genius of the system. It convinces you submission is sophistication. If men knew how much destruction hides behind that sigh, they'd never mistake tension for peace again. Have you ever felt that the kind of silence that doesn't calm you, it cages you? Tell me in the comments. It never starts with control. It starts with concern, a soft tone, a gentle question. Where were you? Who were you with? Why didn't you reply? It sounds like care. It looks like connection, but it feels like surveillance. That's the trap control wrapped in affection. And the worst part, most men think it's love. They call it attention. They call it being cared for. But what nobody tells men is this: when care starts to monitor, it stops being care. What looks like closeness is actually containment. She doesn't say, "You can't." She says, "I just worry." She doesn't forbid, she implies. And implication is more powerful than command, because it makes men police themselves. Most men think they're being considerate. The truth is, they're being conditioned. Every "you're right" becomes a ritual of surrender. Tiny sacrifices that feel harmless until he realizes he's traded freedom for harmony. The system never demands submission outright. It teaches men to volunteer it, because a willing prisoner is easier to love and easier to control. Here's the paradox: the more transparent a man becomes, the less she trusts him. He shows her everything, explains every choice, answers every call, and still, she doubts. Because control feeds on compliance. The more he gives, the less she respects it. What nobody tells men is that constant honesty doesn't create intimacy. It creates exposure, and exposure gives the system more data to weaponize. The joke he made once, now labeled insensitive. The silence after work, emotionally unavailable. The night he needed space, avoidant. Every word, every pause, every breath, recoded, reinterpreted, recycled against him. Soon he stops living, he starts auditing himself. He believes he's buying peace, but he's really paying emotional tax, a monthly subscription for love that never renews. He's the product, not the partner, the labor, not the love. And still, he stays. Because men are taught that leaving isn't courage, it's cruelty. That rebellion equals betrayal. So he protects the cage, calling it commitment. Most men think they're defending their relationship, but the truth is, they're defending their captor. Because in this system, the chains aren't made of control, they're made of guilt, and guilt is the currency that keeps the machine alive. But here's the question that breaks the illusion. If love only exists when you obey, is it really love or just emotional debt disguised as devotion? A man doesn't lose himself all at once. It happens quietly, like a slow leak in the soul, not from heartbreak, but from negotiation fatigue. One small compromise at a time, one silence too many, until one morning, he looks in the mirror and doesn't see a person, just a provider. Not a man, but a role. And roles don't dream, they perform. Most men think they're building relationships, but the truth is, they're building shrines, monuments to peace, built from their own self-erasure. Every choice, every habit, every opinion gets filtered through the same question. What will keep her calm? Not what do I want, not who am I becoming, just what keeps the balance intact. That's not love, that's maintenance. What nobody tells men is that the most effective form of control isn't domination, it's approval addiction. She doesn't have to threaten him, she just has to withdraw validation. He'll do the rest himself. Because a man starved of recognition will trade truth for tolerance and freedom for peace. The system calls this maturity, but it's not maturity, it's emotional domestication. He becomes easygoing, understanding, low maintenance. Those words sound noble, but what they really mean is he stopped resisting. He's not evolving, he's dissolving. The man who once dreamed, argued, built, and fought, gone. Replaced by a calmer, quieter, smaller version of himself. A man redesigned to offend no one, even if it costs him his soul. Most men think that's what love requires. But the truth is, love without individuality isn't intimacy, it's assimilation. Because when everything about him is negotiated, nothing about him is real. Every apology erodes another layer of identity until the only thing left is compliance disguised as kindness. And here's the part that hurts. When he's finally empty enough, she'll say, "You've changed. You're not the man I fell in love with." She's right because she dismantled him piece by piece. But the tragedy, he'll still blame himself. He'll think he didn't love her enough, when in reality, He just stopped loving himself first. What nobody tells men is that disappearing doesn't make her love you more, it only makes you replaceable. Because once you become something instead of someone, you're no longer loved. You're used. And when men finally realize they've been performing instead of living, a question starts burning in their mind. If she never loved you, then who was she actually with all this time? Every man enters love like a gambler who believes he can beat the odds. He tells himself that if he gives enough, sacrifices enough, proves his loyalty long enough one day, she'll finally see his worth. But what nobody tells him is that the house always wins, not because she's cruel, but because the game is designed to keep him playing. This isn't romance. It's intermittent reinforcement, the same psychology that keeps addicts hooked. A small dose of affection here, a sudden withdrawal there, just enough reward to reset his hope, never enough to satisfy it. Every thank you, every rare moment of softness feels like hitting jackpot. And just like a gambler, he keeps pulling the lever, praying for the return of what once felt real. Most men think they're fighting for love, but the truth is, they're fighting for permission for access to approval. Each sigh of disappointment becomes a spin of the wheel. Will she be warm tonight, or will she go cold again? He studies her moods like market data, trying to predict what wins favor and what triggers withdrawal. And that illusion of control, that false belief he can influence the outcome, is what keeps him trapped. What nobody tells men is that inconsistency is more addictive than affection. Certainty feels safe, but unpredictability feels alive. That's why he stays, because the chaos hurts. But the silence would mean it's really over, and men raised to equate pain with purpose can't tell the difference between intensity and intimacy. He invests everything, time, money, sanity chasing ROI that never comes. The more he gives, the deeper he sinks, and the harder it becomes to walk away. Because leaving would mean admitting the game was never winnable. And pride prefers pain over truth. Most men think staying means strength. But the truth is, staying in a rigged system isn't loyalty, it's emotional bankruptcy. Every apology becomes another coin dropped into the machine. Every "I'll try harder" another spin on a wheel built to drain him. What nobody tells men is this: the only way to win a crooked game is to stop playing. But that question haunts him. If he quits the game, who is he without the struggle that defined him? The breaking point never comes with an explosion. It comes quietly, like a system error that finally loops too many times. No shouting, no slammed doors, just that one morning when he wakes up and realizes something unexplainable. He feels lighter when she's not around, and for the first time in years, silence doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like peace. That's the moment the illusion cracks. He finally sees that what he called love was actually debt collection. Every gift, every gesture, every apology, all part of an unpaid invoice from a relationship that feeds on his guilt. He's not loving her anymore. He's paying her emotional bills. Most men think strength means staying. But the truth is, strength means walking away from the place that keeps demanding proof of your worth. What nobody tells them is that peace doesn't come after fixing her, it comes after fixing your programming. Because this entire system was never built to free you, it was built to use you. Useful men don't rebel. They repair, they endure, they apologize for existing, until they forget that endurance was never the point of love. It was the currency of manipulation. Then one day, awareness finally hits, and awareness ruins obedience. He starts asking the forbidden questions. Why does she only soften when he stops fighting? Why does being a good man always mean losing more of himself? Why does love require exhaustion to survive? And once he starts asking, there's no going back. Because once you see the code, you can't unsee the scam. What nobody tells men is that liberation feels wrong at first. Freedom tastes like guilt when you've been trained to call slavery devotion. He'll be accused of changing, of becoming cold, selfish, distant. But that's not detachment, that's detox. That's what healing looks like in a world that profits from your compliance. The first no feels violent. The first boundary feels cruel. But then comes stillness, and in that stillness, he remembers himself. He remembers laughter that wasn't filtered through someone else's approval. He remembers confidence that didn't need validation. He remembers the man he buried to keep the peace. Most men think walking away means losing love. But the truth is, it means regaining gravity, the right to stand on solid ground again. Because when a man stops financing his own destruction, he doesn't just escape her control, he escapes the illusion itself. And that's the moment the system starts to fear him. Because nothing threatens a machine built on obedience more than a man who's finally awake. Freedom doesn't feel heroic at first. It feels strange, almost empty. Because when a man has spent years being defined by someone else's needs, silence sounds like loss. But what nobody tells him is this: peace feels uncomfortable only when chaos was home. He isn't lost, he's unhooked. And learning how to exist without validation is the hardest skill a man can master. Most men think healing means hating women. But the truth is, healing means understanding systems. He doesn't need to fight her. He needs to unlearn himself, unlearn the reflex to explain, unlearn the urge to prove, unlearn the addiction to approval that's been branded as virtue since boyhood. Because real healing isn't revenge, it's balance. And balance begins where appeasement ends. The reconstruction never begins with fireworks. It starts with quiet rebellion. He takes a drive with no destination, buys something just because he wants it, takes an hour for himself and feels no guilt. That's not defiance, that's recovery. Because independence isn't loud, it's steady. It's building a life that doesn't collapse the moment someone disapproves. Then comes reconnection, not with women, but with reality. The gym stops being punishment. It becomes meditation. Work stops being survival. It becomes purpose. Friendship stops being escape. It becomes brotherhood. He learns that power isn't dominance, it's direction, and love without self-respect. That's just dependency with better PR. Most men still believe compassion makes them weak. But what nobody tells them is that compassion without power isn't love. It's leakage. Only a grounded man can love without losing himself. Only a self-sufficient man can protect without controlling. Only a whole man can choose instead of beg to love. Redemption doesn't come from revenge. It comes from reconstruction. When he rebuilds himself, he becomes untouchable not because he's cold, but because he's clear. And clarity makes the entire system irrelevant. Because once a man remembers who he is, he no longer asks for permission to live. And for the first time, he doesn't need pain to feel alive. Here's the truth nobody wants to admit. When a man finally chooses himself, the world calls him dangerous. Not because he harms anyone, but because he can't be used anymore. Society doesn't celebrate that man. It warns people about him. They'll label him detached, heartless, narcissistic, because a man who stops apologizing for his boundaries threatens an entire system built on his compliance. Most men think self-love is ego, but the truth is, self-love is oxygen. It's what keeps him alive after years of emotional suffocation. He's not becoming cold, he's becoming conscious. And consciousness doesn't kneel, doesn't justify, doesn't beg for permission to exist. What nobody tells men is that peace costs everything that was never real. He'll lose the fake approval. He'll lose the illusion of partnership. He'll lose the social badge of a good man. But what remains is clarity. Because you can't build an authentic life inside someone else's story. You have to burn the script they gave you and write your own. He starts to see it clearly. The game was never about connection. It was about containment. Keep men dependable. Keep them guilty. Keep them tired enough not to question why love feels like labor. But once he steps outside the system, everything flips. He no longer craves permission. He no longer fears solitude. He realizes solitude isn't the absence of love. It's the return of self-respect. Most men think the opposite of control is chaos. But the truth is, the opposite of control is choice. And choice terrifies the system because it makes men unpredictable again. He's no longer a servant, no longer a savior. He's a sovereign. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Because when a man reclaims his own loyalty, everything changes. He stops chasing love. He attracts alignment. He stops negotiating peace. He is peace. And that's when the illusion collapses. Because the system can't drain what it no longer owns, a man who's finally, unapologetically, free. If this message hits something in you, don't just nod and scroll. Subscribe, drop your truth in the comments, and share this with a man who needs to remember who he is. Because this isn't content, it's a call to consciousness. And the moment you choose yourself, that's where the revolution begins.